today's live webinar, wherein we are going to talk about how you can manage your end-to-end contract lifecycle on ServiceNow. So today's presentation, let me just quickly cover the basic housekeeping items. So we have planned to cover an extensive webinar today, wherein we'll be showcasing the entire contract lifecycle. So right from how you can create a contract to drafting the contract to reporting and the further analytics. So in the session, while we are doing the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A panel or the chat functionality. And if we miss something out, please don't hesitate and feel free to reach out to us at contact@avenir.com. So without further ado, let me start introducing today's speaker, starting with Russell, who heads the accounts team at Aavenir, bringing in a decade of experience covering the contracting management and code process. Followed by, we also have a product expert, Vikram, who is going to give us a detailed demonstration about how you can enable and manage end-to-end contracts on ServiceNow. So with that, I would just hand it over to Russell to, let's quick start this webinar. Russell, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maddie, for setting the table. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're at. So to start off, before we jump into the contracts discussion, let's just first think of the modern business landscape. The modern business is more reliant than ever on engagements with third parties, whether it's your contracting firms or your customers, suppliers and vendors, your partners. Just about every part of our business is woven very deeply into the third-party marketplace. And every one of these third-party engagements, somehow or other, is defined by a contract. So what's the problem with contracts? Well, it starts with technology. Technology has been advancing rapidly in every part of the business, especially during the past couple of decades with SaaS applications and cloud computing offerings. And even before that, for decades, we've been seeing the advancement of technology across the entire business. Even so, most organizations are still managing contracts with manual, disconnected processes and tools. They're using Microsoft Word, exchanging emails back and forth, Slack messages, phone calls, and meetings. The contract management practices as a whole have seen very little progress throughout the industries. And the bottom line is poor contract management is costing organizations about 9% of their bottom line, according to the IACCM. And there are some consistent problem areas that many companies share that contribute to these inefficiencies and ultimately to this revenue leakage. One of these is a general lack of visibility into agreements. Now, lack of contract visibility can be destructive to your bottom line. One of my customers told me that they had to renew a software application for an entire year because they missed their contractual date to cancel the service. Now, this is a mid-sized business we're talking about. They're managing hundreds of IT vendors and they don't really have a centralized system. Somebody simply keyed the renewal date into an Excel spreadsheet incorrectly. And a clerical error like that cost them thousands of dollars. Now, these examples are pretty common. They come in varying shapes and sizes, but even minor oversights like this add up and prove costly. So just look at this statistic from Ardent Partners. The industry average for on-contract spend is only 53%. And that means almost half of an organization's procurements are happening off contract, which certainly means that tons of transactions are flying under the radar. This is a direct result of just poor visibility into the contracting process. And it's also attributable to another very common problem, which is a lack of governance. Most organizations don't have very much of a firm, authoritative handle on their overall spending strategy. In fact, I'll tell you another story about one of our clients. They initially came to us and started looking at the contract management market because a third of their company purchases were failing the audit done by the procurement team at the end of the year. So maybe there was no purchase order for that purchase, or they were purchasing off contract. Much like the last company, they had a serious problem with people buying under the radar, going off contract, going outside of the preferred vendor network. This creates a ton of unnecessary expense, obviously, and it also sacrifices the opportunity to bolster your vendor relationships by doing consistent and repeat business with your preferred vendor network. The third problem I'm going to touch on is just the amount of time it takes to manage contracts and especially to get them executed. As they say, time kills all deals, right? And I think most procurement and sales leaders will tell you that the contracting process is often the most time-consuming part of the entire process. This adds costs to your operations. Of course, the longer you spend doing something, the more costly it is for the resources that are doing it. But it also has a myriad of other effects, like delaying project timelines. It can hurt your revenue goals when deals are slipping out of a quarter because you can't get the contract negotiated in time. It can also hurt your discount opportunities if you can't get the deal done within the quarter to purchase from a vendor at a discounted rate, because we all know how vendors love to discount at the end of the quarter. Generally, it just makes your company more difficult to transact with. And what causes all of this time? Why is this the case? Well, a lot of it starts with the processes and tools that are in place to actually support efficiency within the contracting realm. Referring back to our previous point, many organizations are still doing contracts the way they did them 15 years ago. Have a look at this statistic from the Aberdeen Group. Best-in-class organizations are executing contracts in around half the time of the industry benchmark. These firms have well-defined processes that are supported by modern technology that help drive automation, reduce manual administrative task work, and help keep the ball pushing forward. And another key challenge that we're going to talk about is the general decentralization of processes and tools. And this is an issue that almost every company grapples with in some capacity. And it's one that's not always really easy to identify as a problem. I'll give you some examples. Maybe you have different regional processes. Your EMEA branch manages their contracts within their team, and it's separate entirely from the North America branch, who has their own team and their own processes. Sometimes you have processes that are unique to a certain part of the business, right? Sales contracts are done one way, purchasing contracts are done the other way. They almost exist in silos. Sometimes there's different tools being used by different teams to store and manage signed agreements, so not really a standard approach across the organization. Silos of tools and processes like this, they tend to evolve as a company grows in size and especially grows into new regions, because you've got to hire people in other parts of the world, and they almost start to operate as a kind of a separate business altogether. And while it might not feel like doing different contracts for different business functions with different tools is an actual problem, the reality is your company is missing out on an org-wide view of all of the data that your contracts hold. And your contracts hold very valuable data about every part of the enterprise. So there's a really big opportunity for improvement here from a reporting and analytics and data perspective that uniquely touches every part of the company. So why don't we take a quick pause and just do a simple pulse check on the material that we've covered so far. This is a poll for the group. Do any of these problems sound familiar? Does any of this hit close to home? Or are you doing really well with your contract management processes? So let's give everybody a couple of minutes, or maybe a couple of seconds, I should say, to respond to the poll. We'll give you the feedback as soon as we get it. Well, as I might have, maybe I didn't anticipate this, but 100% of respondents said yes, some of these problems hit close to home. I guess it's not that hard to believe, after all, here on a contract management webinar. And thank you again for joining. So let's touch quickly on another topic that I think is very important, and that is managing contractual obligations. Many tools on the market focus entirely on the process of executing new contracts. They fall short on the management of contractual obligations. Now, in the modern business climate, which relies so heavily on engagements with third parties, like we discussed at the beginning of the presentation, companies need to have a clear strategy to ensure that they are performing against their contractual commitments, and also that their vendors and partners and customers are doing the same. Having a system of record for identifying, assigning, and monitoring contractual obligations really is the next generation of contractual risk mitigation. This is a gap in just about every organization's contract strategy. It's very decentralized, and this is a very ripe for opportunity area of the contract management process where just about every organization could stand to improve a little bit. So we talked about some of the challenges that organizations face within managing contracts in general. Let's just summarize the high level value proposition. It really comes in three key buckets. One is eliminating financial losses. Another is realizing greater value from your agreements. And third is improving third-party relationships with your vendors, with your customers, with your partners, simply enough by ensuring that you always hold up your end of the bargain. Your organization works very hard to negotiate these terms and to get these contracts in place with all the third parties that you do business with. There is nothing your partners and customers and vendors like better than knowing that you're going to hold up your end of the bargain when you sign that contract and decide to do business and form a new relationship with an organization. So, how can Avenir deliver on these lofty promises and help to address some of these problems that just about every company is facing? Well, it starts with having an end-to-end platform that can address every part of the process when it comes to contracts. So starting with the intake. Intake can be defined as somebody needs a contract, simply enough. Maybe a new vendor sends you their terms and conditions on their paper, and you need to have your legal team start reviewing it. Maybe your marketing team needs an NDA so they can start negotiating with a contractor. Anybody in the company needs a new contract. How do we get the process started? That's what we call intake. The next step is really the execution of those agreements. Now, this second box is where most organizations go completely dark when it comes to actual enterprise application support. This is all done in Microsoft Word. There's no real logic behind the process. It's simply lawyers and finance directors and business stakeholders making changes to Word documents and emailing them back and forth to one another until we finally come to terms. Obviously, it works because we're all in business, but there's a lot of opportunity for improvement within that particular box. And I'll tell you, if we think back to the slide that showed us that best-in-class firms are getting this done in half the time as the industry benchmarks, that's because those firms are really good at these first two boxes. They're able to identify the need for a new contract and have a system that flows that identification of a need into the queue of the team that manages the contract, and then also the same system supporting that process with some automation technology and some workflows and routing policies based on the type of agreement. Once you get your contracts executed and signed, it's all about the management of the agreement. This is visibility into your renewal dates, so you're no longer being pigeonholed into renewing a software agreement for another year that you probably would have canceled, or at the very least right size the license count. This is having contract level analytics all the way down to the contract record, seeing analytics about an individual contract, as well as having dashboards and reports so you can view the macro level analytics across the enterprise or within a single business unit. The ongoing management of agreements is something what most organizations would just love to have. Show me all my contracts expiring in the next 30 days. Show me all my contracts that have, net 15 payment terms. Just that level of data accessibility is highly sought after. And of course, the final box is the compliance strategy. This is a differentiator for Avenir. Having a compliance strategy solution built into the rest of the contract, all on the same platform. And the good news is that platform is the ServiceNow platform. which is more or less the global leader in workflow management, automation management, remote work delivery. It's the ideal platform for us to deliver contract lifecycle management to you on. And all of our technology is underpinned by digital workflows on the ServiceNow platform and artificial intelligence to help drive efficiency and reduce the manual, laborious task work that goes into a lot of this. So, time for me to pause, and I'm going to pass the reins over to Vikram for the live solution demonstration. Vikram, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Russell. Hope you can hear me. Russell, if you can just confirm that.
Loud and clear. Can't see you though.
All right. Okay, so yes, that was a very good context setting, Russell. Thank you for that. And I'd like to take a quick moment here to welcome everyone on this call today. Thank you very much for being with us today. I really appreciate that. And so as Russell said that context really well about what are the top key pains and challenges that organizations face today with regards to their contracting. So I'm going to now jump into a product demonstration and show you how we help solve those problems. And so I'm going to share my screen right now. And I believe now you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks for that, Russell. So first of all, if you are an Aavenir Contractflow user, then when you log in to Aavenir Contractflow, this is going to be your landing page. And if you can recollect from Russell's presentation, the very first problem that he had talked about was that of visibility. There is no visibility today across your contracts, simply for the simple reason that your contracts are all over the place today. They're shared, they're stored in different folders, shared drives, and you may eventually not have any real control over where they are actually currently located. You know, it could be on your own laptop, it could be on someone else's laptop. Some contracts can just be in email, and we all know how painful it is just to search for just even simple emails, right? And let alone contracts. Now, the whole idea here is we bring everything to you consolidated in one single global centralized repository that is accessible from anywhere in the world, any geography you're located, no matter where you are. We just want, as long as you have an internet connection. And this global central contract repository is built natively 100% on ServiceNow. And so if you're on the ServiceNow platform, that is a big advantage you get, because we're just an application that you install within your ServiceNow instance, and you're just good to go with that, which means you get all of the good things such as data security, information security, backup and recovery, disaster recovery, all of the good things that come along with it automatically when you use Aavenir Contractflow. So if you can see right now, I'm logged into Aavenir, and the top right corner here, it shows the user I'm logged in as. Today, I'm logged in as Lisa Gill. And on the left-hand side, we see the branding. It says Aavenir Contractflow. And this, by the way, can, of course, be customized to your branding. So the entire look and feel can be customized to your corporate themes and standards. And as soon as you log in, this is the landing page. This is where we straight away take you as soon as you log into Aavenir. So from a stage where you have virtually no visibility, to a stage where you have ample visibility, almost to anything that you want to know about your contracts, right? So because this is a single source of truth, we can derive all kinds of information that you want to know about a contract. So say, for example, you want to know which are your contracts that are at various stages of negotiation. Like some of your contracts could be just being in the, you've just drafted some contracts, or some contracts you've sent to an external party for review. Certain contracts may be pending for approval for certain key terms and conditions. How do you keep track of all that? And the first graph right here that says contracts by stages tells you just that. So if you want to know which are your contracts that are in, waiting for approval, according to this graph here, you see there are 46 contracts that are currently in approval. And if you want to actually know which are those contracts, just simply clicking on that section of the graph gives you this report, a listing of contracts that are in that particular stage. Likewise, if you want to know which are the contracts and signatures, it's 27 contracts here. That's very useful information for you because contracts that are waiting for signatures, excuse me, just need to be signed, and the business can begin then, right? Because everything has already been done, all approvals have been taken, it's just waiting for signatures. So very useful information again that you can get from this one little graph here, contracts by stages, which tells you the spread of all your contracts across various stages. And by the way, anybody could be, working with a contract with any of your suppliers anywhere in the world. And, this graph will always tell you where exactly a contract is at any given point of time. So that's great information for visibility. How does all this information actually feed into this dashboard, right? So the answer to that is the way we store contracts. How do we store contracts in this system? So let's take a look at one of the contracts. So let's say again, let's go back to Lisa, who's logged in today, and she's just starting her her regular day work. And here are the contracts that she's currently working on. So you can see, she can see a list of contracts here that are in various stages, which type of contracts they are. So this procurement, she's working on some software licenses. And here's a master service agreement that she's working on that currently says it's in the draft stage. Let's take a look at what this contract really looks like. How do we store a contract in the system, that gives you all of this amazing visibility and feeds into these dashboards? So as soon as I click into any one of those contracts, it takes me right into a very amazing, intuitively designed screen. You see this split view, left and right, side by side view. On the left hand side, first of all, you see some of the key fields and terms pertaining to this contract. So for example, the name of this contract, which is of course a free text that you can give to any and every contract just so that you can identify your contracts. Here's the vendor. And by the way, these are approved onboarded vendors. And so again, going back to another point that Russell had talked about in his slides presentation, where sometimes you may end up doing contracts with vendors who are not onboarded, of course, and that impacts your relationships with those vendors, because the more contracts and business you do with your onboarded vendors, you're driving up that business relationship, right? And then, we also show you a risk score here. So one of the advantages of us being on the ServiceNow platform is that we can derive a lot of information from ServiceNow. So ServiceNow has a GRC, governance and risk compliance module, where you can use that for assessing vendors and assign various risk scores to them. And so that's where we get this information from. This can help drive a lot of automated workflows in our system. So essentially on here, what you're seeing is start date, term, end date, a lot of key information from the contract. On the right-hand side, you actually see the contract itself. This is, we call this as a live view. So this is exactly what's going to go out to the other party when you send it out to them for negotiation. And if we scroll down a little bit, you will see that here's where the actual contract document resides. So what you're seeing on the right side actually gets converted into a document. And we, by the way, store each and every version. So throughout your negotiation cycle, you're going to go through so many rounds of back and forth negotiation. So you send it to the supplier does some redlining, sends it back to you, and again, you send it back to them. And you want to have an efficient way to keep track of all of those versions. As you can clearly see here in this contract itself, I've already got 5 different versions of this contract, starting from the original draft, and the negotiation can continue. So in just one intuitively designed screen, you can see all information about your contract, plus the entire workflow that this contract is going to go through. So from draft, it'll be sent to reviews, approvals, signatures, until you finally get it to this stage where the contract is brought into the in effect stage, which is where we say that this contract is now in the activated state. And how do you progress a contract from one stage to another? Well, that's again also very easy. So let's say this is a contract that you want to send out for review to your external party, to your supplier in this case. How do we do that? It's really easy. You see the actions here on the top right corner. I can quickly send this for external review, for internal legal review. Or if I wanted to send it for approval, I could do that, or submit this for signature. Let's say if I want to send it for external review, all I do is hit that action button. I can select the version which I want to send for review, and just type in whom I want to send it out to for review, select a template. Now, these templates really help you speed up the whole process, because otherwise you just end up wasting a lot of time typing out emails, and you need to type out a subject line and a body line. The templates just fill out all of that text for you. You can, of course, change this text, and the attachment is already here. Just go ahead and hit the send button, and that's it. So in just a very short span of time, what we've just done is we saw what a contract looks like, and we sent it out to an external party for review. And that's how this contract essentially moves from one stage to another stage. You will now notice that it shows that this contract is now again back in external review. And generally, based on based on previous contracts that have been sent out for review, in similar kind of businesses, system predicts that this might take about 5 days until it goes to the next stage. And again, that's a little bit of that's where our artificial intelligence comes into picture. So going back to where we started from. So this is, we are here back to the landing page. We just saw, as soon as you log in to Aavenir, how you can immediately get a view into where your contracts stand, and how you can actually quickly get to work with all your current contracts that you are currently working on. So the two most important things are available right here on top of the screen as soon as you log in. So that's specifically designed to help you quickly get to work and raise your levels of productivity. But there's a lot more to visibility than just knowing where your contracts stand and what contracts you're working on. There's really a lot more. One of the things that becomes really important for any and every contract is, when do you renew your contract? And as Russell also mentioned in his slide deck presentation, one of the customers he talked about ended up missing renewal, ended up missing the end date of a contract, and so the contract got auto-renewed, and that company really didn't want to actually continue with that contract. They would have preferred to end it. So how do you keep track that contracts are coming up for expiry, right? So there's so much of information we provide you here for that. So first of all, here you can see expiring contracts, all expiring contracts that are, this contract is going to expire within 30 days. This one is going to expire within the next 60 days, and so on. And there's also this nice little graph here on the left-hand side that tells you 6 contracts total that are expiring in 30 days, 9 contracts total that are expiring in 60 days. So essentially, this graph gives you a full visibility into all your contracts that are due to expire. When? Well, in the next 90 days, in the next 60 days, and in the next 30 days. These are the three. These are also the 3 points where you will actually get a notification through an email as an alert. Like you don't need to actually log into Aavenir to see which are your expiring contracts. As soon as any contract is reaches that threshold of 90 days, 60 days, or 30 days, the system will send you an email and notify you that, hey, this contract is due for expiry. What do you want to do? You want to renew it? Well, then you can go through renewal workflows, or if you want to just let it expire, or upgrade or downgrade your levels of services, well, you have enough time to think about those things as well. One of the things that I generally ask my customers and prospects, and like, how many contracts do you have in your organization, and or how many vendors do you work with? There's always an approximate answer, but no one really knows that real answer. And that's again something that we give you here straight out of the box. Key indicators: 44 vendors right now in this system and 138 active contracts. Again, all of these benefits, this amazing visibility that you're seeing here, is simply because what we are giving you is a single source of truth for all your contracts. This is a global centralized repository. So because all your contracts are here, all the information from that contract is feeding these dashboards, and that's how you're getting all of this amazing visibility. And just to show you one more example. So again, this is something that Russell referred to. How do you know your contracts by payment terms? And this is very important. Like, we've put all of these graphs because they serve a certain purpose. So for example, if this green section here shows me that I've got 3 contracts right now that have a net 60 payment term, which is good, which is generally what everyone wants to strive for. But do I know which are my contracts where I've got like net 10 or net 30, and I've got 11 contracts here that's net 30 payment terms? Is that information useful? Yes, very much. Why? Because I could probably try and renegotiate a slightly more lenient term with that supplier, right? Maybe a net 60 or a net 90. If not net 90, at least a net 60. That will help me as a company to keep my cash with me for a longer period of time, better manage my working capital. Now, again, I would just say, think back to the times in your organization, your day-to-day work, when you wanted to fetch this kind of information, and how easy or how difficult was it for you to get this information. So you would definitely agree that this information being instantly available to you is really valuable, can save you lots and lots of manual effort and hours. And once again, going back to the problem that Russell said, that lack of visibility. So we are taking you completely from lack of visibility to ample visibility, and as much visibility into whatever terms and conditions as you want, because this dashboard is also very flexible. It's very configurable. And of course, we can take a look at it in more detail if any of you are really interested. We can configure so much more information on these dashboards. So with that, I'm going to switch gears now into something else. And the second problem that Russell talked about was the lack of governance. There's a lot of contracting in large organizations like where you all come from. There's lots of contracting happening, and often those contracts are, it happens that you're doing a contract with a vendor that was probably not onboarded or is not in your preferred list of vendors, off radar kind of purchases, right? So how do we bring in that governance? So first of all, let's say if you want to create a new contract with with a supplier, so you'd log in here to Aavenir, you'd land on this page, and you just hit Pick Contract, choose your vendor. Now, these vendors, by the way, are a list of your onboarded vendors that you've onboarded after doing all the due diligence, the RFI, RFX processes, right? And after having verified and validated everything that you need to do. So there is no chance, that you're going to end up with a contract with a vendor that's not on your list already. So you select your vendor from here and select the type of contract. Let's say I want to do a master services agreement with the Acer. And then I have to select a template. Let's say I select the English template. And so this, by the way, gives you the flexibility to have different types of contract templates for different regions. So if you do business in, say, Europe, you could have your templates in German or Russian or various different languages. So that's a very good, powerful capability again that you get with Avenir's contract flow. And so now you see we are back into that familiar screen that we saw a little while back. This is the contract workspace. This is where you're going to spend most of your time while you're working with this contract, all the way till you get it through signatures and activated, because this is where you do everything. You have all your workflow stages here, you have actions here. Now, this is a brand new contract. I've just created this right now in front of you. Let me go ahead and give a name to this contract. And let's say I'm going to call it MSA for subsidiary business, okay, for supplies. And that's the risk score for Acer. Let's say that this contract starts on, say, the 10th of February. And I want this to be, suppose, a 3-year contract. So as soon as I type in 3 years, you can see it calculates the end date based on the fact that I said 3 years. Do I want this to be an automatic renewal, or I don't want it to be, so I can just uncheck that? What kind of payment terms this contract is I would prefer to have with the supplier, and what's the governing law? Let's say United States, right? And after filling out that basic information, and by the way, this form fill that you're seeing is again flexible. So depending upon the kind of information that that's important to you and to your organization, this form can be configured to show up those fields, right? So after filling out this information, go ahead and hit save. And as soon as I hit save, this we would have started off the first stage of this contract, so which is the draft stage. So you would see that in this workflow, it would be in the draft stage. So there you see it's just coming up on your screen right there, that light blue circle that's highlighted just now, just above my mouse pointer. It shows you that this is now the first draft. Okay, and at this point of time, I can actually generate the document. So when I click this button here, generate document, it picks up all the information from these fields. It picks up this template from the template library, and it will generate the first version of this contract, which you can then send out to your supplier. Where's the document? It's right here. In this case, now you see this is version number 1.0. In the example earlier that I'd shown you, that was a contract which already had multiple versions. This is the first version. This is how it starts its life cycle. And now through the process of negotiation back and forth, there can be multiple versions. So once again, going back to the point of the global repository being not just a repository of all your active contracts, but it also keeps track of each and every version of your contract as you go through the process of negotiation. So that's how, once again, going back to the problem number 2 that Russell talked about of, being able to have good, strong, solid governance across your contracting processes. So by having these workflows, by the way, and being able to reference your onboarded vendors, we ensure that there is a very good level of governance already in place across your contracting workflow. And if there's any kind of deviation, of course, then there's always approval processes, and that's why we have the approval stages in every contract. So absolutely, you can be sure that nothing in your contracting process is going to go unnoticed, because there's always something that's going to make sure that there are checks and balances in place. So that goes back to the problem number 2, of course, and then Russell also talked about consuming a lot of time. As you can just see, just by what I've just done now, I generated my first draft version of a contract, and I can go to this action section and send it out for external review or for approval of signature, whatever the case may be. You can pretty well imagine that just by this, your entire time that you would actually take for your contracting process can easily come down by more than half, and actually even more. But our customers see immense amount of increase in productivity because of using this kind of a simple, easy to learn centralized tool, with a centralized repository. So clearly, you stand to benefit from a time perspective. It's really going to help you speed up a lot of your contracting processes in your organization. And Russell also spoke about decentralization, and that's an interesting point that he brought there, because in large organizations, what happens is you have your distributed geography, and different parts of the business in different parts of the world probably want to do things slightly differently. And so you also want to give them that flexibility that they're able to tailor their workflow. So on one hand, you have the ability that, hey, let's have one standard workflow. So every MSA in my organization is going to go through this standard workflow, no matter which part of the world you're from. Or you might say that, hey, you know what, for Asia Pacific, let's just kind of tailor this workflow a little bit, and for North America, let's have a slightly different workflow. That's fine, and that's really what I call as controlled decentralization of your overall contracting process. And I'm sure in large organizations, you really want to have that flexibility without losing that control and governance over that. So not like, when you're doing everything manually without a tool, you just don't know who's doing what in Australia, who's doing what in India, who's doing what in North America. So you don't want that. But that's why what I call this as controlled decentralization. You still have all your governance and guardrails up and your checks and balances. All right, and then the last thing that Russell talked about in his slide was, well, you've done all of this fantastic contracting, you reduced your contract times, and you've now got this contract in effect, and you have so many of these active contracts in your organization. Who's keeping track of all these contracts? And well, especially when I say who's keeping track of these contracts, who's keeping track of all the obligations that you have on these contracts, right? That's really key, especially when it comes to maintaining a very high level of compliance, contractual compliance. How does that work? Well, Aavenir helps with that as well, because Aavenir gives you a complete obligations management module that comes along with this contract flow. It's an add-on that, and let me show you what that looks like. So this is my obligations dashboard. So essentially what we do is we take your active contracts, essentially signed contracts that have been signed and are already in effect. We run it through an AI model, an artificial intelligence model. And what that does is it looks through the entire contract and identifies some of the key obligations that you would always be concerned about, from a compliance standpoint. Things like delivery terms and conditions, payment terms, and maybe some audits and service level SLAs. Those kind of certain types of fees. These are the some kind of obligation that you're always concerned about, and you want to make sure that your general state of compliance across these obligations is always at a very high level. So our AI model looks into all your active contracts, and it's able to really intelligently identify these obligations, and these obligations feed into these obligations dashboard. Now, this dashboard that you're seeing right now on the screen has been specifically designed to show 3 different personas. And again, of course, in a larger demonstration, we can show you how each persona can have a completely different and tailored view. But let's take a look at what this dashboard is really showing you here. First of all, who's most interested in making sure that your company, your organization is absolutely compliant? Obviously, your top most executives, your CXOs, your general counsels, they want to make sure that at a highest level, your rate of compliance, contractual compliance is high. And so this graph, the one you see here that says general compliance, is what they are really going to be interested in, because in one glance, it tells you that there's, what's the percentage of compliance or of fulfilled obligations here versus what's the percentage of obligations that are still in fulfillment. And the whole color scheme has been also chosen so that it's easy for you to notice, because you want more green. The more green you see, the more compliant you are. The more blue you see, there's more things to be done. And that's why we've chosen that color scheme. So if this was more green, you knew that your state of compliance is higher. And this is a quick view for your CFOs or for your general counsel that say, hey, it looks like we're doing really well from a compliance standpoint. Okay, so but that was at the highest level. But now, what about coming down to one level down? Let's say that how are we doing on a compliance standpoint from specific categories of compliances? And who's this? Who is the person who's really interested in this? It's the it's a functional heads. It's people who are driving certain lines of businesses, right? For example, if I want to know how well are we doing on payment compliances, well, these, again, the blue ones are where we still need to fulfill certain compliances. And the green ones, of course, are where we've already fulfilled those compliances. So in each section, like in payment, I can see there is one obligation that I still need to do here, while there's 3 that has already been taken care of. So overall, 60% is my overall fulfillment in terms of payment compliances. So this is, again, this is the level, one level down view of this overall general compliances. Now, when it comes to actually fulfilling these compliances and fulfilling these obligations, it finally boils down to certain tasks that individuals need to own and individuals need to do. And so we are now going to take a look at that level. So we're going down one more level. And we have this breakup here as to what are the various tasks, a total number of tasks across owners, right? Various people in your organization. So a quick look over here immediately tells you that Lisa, the user who's logged in right now, has 12 different tasks or action items pending on her. Now, if she was able to go complete these 12 tasks, it would definitely move up the compliance levels of some of these different obligations across these various different categories, right? And so if you were Lisa's manager, you could immediately just send out a reminder to Lisa, hey, can you just look into these 12 tasks and see how many of them you can take care of before the end of this quarter, so that we have a good rate of compliance, right? So this graph really helps you get down to the ground. And also, if you're yourself the owner, you yourself would know, okay, these are the things that I need to do, so let me get working on these, right? So what I'm trying to show you here is from an overall compliance standpoint, there are many different views. One view is not going to be enough. So you obviously need to have the highest level view. What's your overall compliance? You also want to have what's your function level of compliance across various categories of obligations, which is very important for line of business heads and functional heads. But at the end of the day, it's the individual owners of the various actions that need to perform them, so that these obligations ultimately are fulfilled, and ultimately you have a fantastic overall state of compliance across all your contracts. Ultimately, this is what you're aiming for. More compliance, the better it is. All right, so with that, that's what I wanted to cover today. So just to quickly recap, so Russell talked about 4 different problems, about the lack of visibility, lack of governance, lots of time being consumed, and then the decentralization, obligations. And we've kind of taken a look at all of these different aspects of how we take you from no visibility to ample visibility, to no governance, to every governance, checks and balance, approvals that you want to implement, want to have, enforce over your contracting processes. Lots of time savings, of course, that come along with it, controlled decentralization, and finally, a complete view into your contractual obligations that will help you drive up your overall organizational compliance. With that, I'd like to hand this over back to Russell and Maddie. Russell, thank you.
Thanks, Vikram. Great job on the presentation. Covered a lot of bases. I hope everybody was able to stick around and consume everything. So let us shift back quickly to just some closing notes and thoughts from today's presentation. I'll start by directing you to our website where we have a wealth of valuable and helpful resources, including readiness assessments, a lot of thought leadership blogs and articles and ebooks, white papers, ROI calculators. All this is actually consolidated into one link called the Contract Management Value Kit. So I certainly urge you to go check that out. And that really wraps up the material for today. Maddie, I will look to you for guidance on if we want to stick around for any questions. I'm more than happy to stick around and address any questions that come from the field.
Yeah, so right now I just received one question is about the licensing model. So how does the product works? Like, do I need to buy an additional license? So what is the licensing model?
Sure thing. So I can take that one. Our licensing model is, it's a per user per month licensing model. It very closely follows the ServiceNow requester and fulfiller licensing model, if you're at all familiar with that. This is a question I think would be best addressed in a one-on-one session. So I do encourage you to reach out to me directly. Russell.Seifert@Aavenir.com. Don't worry, you'll probably hear from me if you're in this webinar right now, so you won't have any trouble getting in touch with me. Just to clarify, we are a separate company from ServiceNow while we do partner with them. So you will license with us directly, and you don't need to go purchase anything special from ServiceNow to get started with Aavenir.
Okay, that's great. So got one more question. Can users perform live edits and redlining within the live view of the contract? Or do they have to download or upload? Like, is there any offline or online process required?
Russell, do you want to answer that or should I answer that?
I can take that one. So the live view of the contract is a read-only format. For the redlining and review process, we actually facilitate that with a Microsoft Word integration. So when you saw Vikram generate the document, it created a Word document, which was then attached to the Aavenir contract record. So we actually integrate with Microsoft Word. So you would send that Word document to your third party. They would do what they always do, redline the Word document. When it comes back to you, you can check that document in straight from Microsoft Word. You can use clause library, contract summary functionality. We have a direct integration with the ServiceNow platform and Microsoft Word for our contract managers out there. That way we really eliminate that whole painful download, re-upload, manual version control. All of that is going to be covered by Aavenir's Word plugin.
Okay, that's great. So there's one question from Anne. Yeah, we will be sharing this webinar recording, and you can, if any additional inputs required, like if you want us to help us get in touch with your stakeholders, or like you want to create a business use case, feel free to get in touch with us. We will be very happy to discuss and help you in how you can convince your stakeholders. Okay, so yeah, I think I'll just give it next 5 to 10 seconds if there are any questions. And we are way above our time limit. So, okay. So no questions.
Sticking around, everybody. I hope the presentation has been valuable.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Russell, and thank you, Vikram, for an amazing session. Take care, and thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.